All right, let's go ahead and finish up the second part of the subnetting for day one here. So you see we're kind of staying with the same IP address, but we've changed the CIDR notation. Well, if you look at a /27 goes up by 32. Well, we're dealing with 57, so we need to find out what's going to fall below it, what's going to fall above it. And let's start out with .0, and let's add in 32. Well, when we get to 32, 0 plus 32 is obviously 32, and 57 does not fall between 0 and 32. So we're going to add in another 32. So .32, it's just really 32 IP addresses is what I should have just done. And we're at 64. Well, we know that 57 definitely falls between 32 and 64. These are network IDs. So 32 obviously is the lower of the two, so we're going to use a .32. And of course, .64 is the next network ID, so it's outside the goalpost. 57 fits perfectly in here. So our network ID is a .32. Our first usable is obviously going to be one higher than 32, which is going to be 33. We go down here to the broadcast. The broadcast has to be one less than the next network ID. Well, we're looking at 64. One less is obviously 63, and the last usable is obviously 62. All right, next one. Let's move down to it. Now we're doing a different CIDR. We have changed again. So now we're into a /26. Go up there, /26 goes up by 64 IP addresses. Okay, let's start out at our typical 0, and let's add that 64. And we're going to end up here where we have 0. Okay, now our next one is 64. Well, 103 does not end up in there, so let's go up by another 64. And when we go up by that 64, now we're at 128, because 64 plus 64 is 128. 103 falls in between. Well, we know the 64 is inside the goalpost. We've seen that enough. We know that 128 is outside of it, so we can't use it. So what do? Well, we go up here. We know, hey, this one's inside the goalpost. That's our network ID. We're going to go up by 1 above the network ID to get our first usable. We go down here. Let's look at the broadcast. Well, it's got to be one less than the next network ID, which is a 127. And obviously the broadcast is the last. So to get the last usable, you need to take 1 away from it. And there's your 126. Network ID is even, broadcast is odd. There's 64 IP addresses, only 62 are usable. And the last one for this particular series. We're now going to choose a /25, which we're going to go up by, what? 128. Well, we need to get 213 in between something here. So let's start out with 0. And when you get to this problem, whoops. Well, we know we're not going to start here. I meant to start down here. That it has to maybe have a little bit of a rollover. We'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Well, 0 plus 128. And we're going to put this in here. I'm going to scroll this a little bit. And we got 128. Well, 213 does not fall in there. So it looks like we need to add another 128. Well, this is where I say we're going to use the odometer, because 128 plus 128 is 256. I told you cannot use 256. You can't go back 1 because network IDs have to be even. So the odometer in your car rolls over once you hit a certain number. Same thing kind of happens here. We go to 76.0 because that's 128 IP addresses higher than 128. So we know we're at 75.128 is our actual network ID. That's inside the goalpost. And we know that the next network ID ends up being .76.0. So let's go up here. We know our network ID is 128. We know the first usable has to be one higher than the 128. which is our network ID. If we come down here to broadcast, remember that rollover point, because it's got to be one less. That rollover point is 255. So 255 still staying at 75.255, and one less than 255 is 254. Now, if this has been helpful, please subscribe. Please let other people know about it. I will start pushing out other videos. I will do different problems. I'll start doing, move you into the third octet. I will do variable length subnet masking, where we take a subnet and we actually divide it up into different sizes using different CIDR notations. Thank you, and we'll be back tomorrow with more, hopefully.